I want to start today with a number that completely stopped me in my tracks. It's one of those statistics that you read, and then you just have to read it again to make sure you didn't misunderstand it.
I have a feeling I know exactly which number you're looking at.
Yeah, you probably do. It's from the VA Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention. The data shows that over 60% of veterans who die by suicide were not seen by the Veterans Health Administration in the year prior to their death.
Right. It is a staggering figure.
It's more than staggering. I mean, it seems to completely upend the traditional narrative we always hear about, waiting lists or the quality of care at VA hospitals. But this data suggests that for the vast majority of these tragedies, the quality of care inside the hospital is
irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. Irrelevant, because the veteran never even walked through the doors.
That is the crux of the issue. That 60% represents a massive blind spot because for decades, the strategy was essentially to build better hospitals, hire more doctors, and wait for the veterans to come to us. But the data screams that they aren't coming.
So if they aren't coming to the hospital, where are they?
Well, they're in their communities, they're at their jobs or, looking for jobs, they are with their families. And that realization that we cannot save people we cannot see, that is the foundation of what we're covering in our deep dive today.
Right.
We're looking at a huge pivot in how the U.S. government handles veteran suicide. It's a shift from a strict medical model to a public health model.
And at the center of this shift is a program with a very long, very specific name, the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program.
It's a mouthful for sure, so we can probably stick to the SSG Fox SPGP or just the Fox Grant for today. But the name really matters here.
It does. And I really want to spend some time on the who before we get into the what. Because usually government acts are named after, I don't know, senators or generals.
Like senior officials.
Exactly. But this is named after a 25-year-old staff sergeant. I was reading through his background for this deep dive, and honestly, he just doesn't fit the civilian stereotype of a vulnerable veteran.
No, he really doesn't. Parker Gordon Fox joined the Army in 2014, and he was a sniper instructor at the U.S. Army Infantry School at Fort Benning.
A sniper instructor.
Yeah.
I mean, in the hierarchy of military toughness, that is the peak.
Absolutely.
You have to be technically perfect, physically elite, and just mentally rock solid to teach other people how to do that job.
Exactly. He was the tip of the spear. And looking at the testimonies from his unit and his family, he was known for his generosity and kindness. His obituary highlights a legacy of loyalty, thoughtfulness, joy, compassion. He was the guy who looked out for everyone else.
The strong friend.
The strong friend, the
Yeah.
leader. And yet, on July 21st, 2020, at the age of 25, he died by suicide.
It's just heartbreaking. But I think it's also crucial context for you as the listener.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about veteran suicide, I think people often picture someone who is visibly broken, maybe unemployed, struggling with addiction. But here was a young active duty leader.
Right. His death highlighted that this affects the entire spectrum. It's not just the older veteran with chronic pain, it's the elite young soldier, too. And his tragedy, along with the story of Commander John Scott Hannon, who was a Navy SEAL who also struggled with combat trauma and TBI, became the vessel for this new legislation.
So let's look at the legislation itself. We are pulling from the Commander John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Care Improvement Act of 2019. That's Public Law 116-171. But the specific mechanism, the Fox Grant, is trying to solve that 60% problem we started with. So how does it actually work?
It works by admitting defeat, in a sense.
Defeat.
Or maybe humility is a better word. The VA essentially admitted we cannot reach everyone, so instead of trying to force veterans into the VA system, they decided to outsource the search and rescue mission.
Outsource it to whom?
To the community. The Fox Grant provides up to $750,000 annually to community-based organizations. We are talking about tribal nations, local nonprofits, county governments, the people who are already on the ground.
Okay, so instead of a veteran having to drive 3 hours to a VA hospital, they might go to a local nonprofit right in their own town.
Precisely. And the key philosophy here is something the legislation calls no wrong door.
No wrong door. I saw that phrase pop up a few times in the legislative texts and the House committee testimony. It sounds a bit like a marketing slogan, but legally, what does that actually mean?
It means removing the typical barriers to entry. And here is a detail that I think is revolutionary, even though it sounds totally bureaucratic. To qualify for help under the Fox Grant, homelessness is not a requirement.
Wait, usually it is.
For a lot of federal support programs, yes. Historically, to get significant aid, you often had to be at rock bottom, like literally homeless or on the very verge of it.
So the safety net was basically lying flat on the ground. You had to completely crash to hit it.
Correct. The Fox Grant lifts the net. It serves both veterans and their families, and it allows these organizations to intervene upstream.
Let's unpack upstream, because that's a buzzword we hear a lot in public health circles.
Sure. Imagine a river leading to a waterfall. The waterfall is the suicide attempt. Traditional mental health care waits at the bottom of the waterfall to catch people. Upstream prevention means going way up the river and figuring out what is pushing people into the current in the first place.
And what pushes them isn't always a medical issue, right? It's not just clinical depression.
No, it's life. The VA identifies specific risk factors here. Sure, there are health risks like TBI or chronic pain, but there are also environmental risks: losing a job, a bad divorce, legal trouble, financial ruin, and historical risks like prior attempts or military sexual trauma.
So if a veteran is freaking out because they can't pay rent, a traditional doctor might say, here's an antidepressant. But the Fox Grant approach would be,
Here's a case manager who will help you negotiate with your landlord, and here's a job placement service.
it treats the actual cause of the stress, not just the biological reaction to it.
Exactly. And that is why the list of services funded by this grant is so interesting. Yes, it funds baseline mental health screenings, peer support, and help obtaining VA benefits. But it also explicitly funds non-traditional and innovative approaches.
Which gives them flexibility.
Huge flexibility. It allows for things like animal therapy or outdoor retreats, things that might appeal to a veteran who would never, ever sit on a therapist's couch.
We actually have some really powerful examples of this in the impact reports. There's a story about a veteran named Alice. This is from testimony by a grantee called Shepard Pratt.
Oh, Alice's story is the perfect example of the upstream concept in action.
So just painting the picture from the sources.
Yeah.
Alice was grieving the death of her sister. She was facing eviction. She was unemployed. She was spiraling. In the old model, she might have just fallen through the cracks until she ended up in the ER.
Or worse. But the grantee intervened on the environmental factors. They didn't just hand her a pamphlet or ask her how she was feeling. They actively coordinated housing for her. They got her a computer. And within a month, they helped her land a job in the IT field.
They basically gave her a future.
They stabilized her foundation. And by doing that, they likely prevented a mental health crisis from ever becoming fatal.
There's another example from the Boulder Crest Foundation. They run these warrior retreats. This one gets a little darker, but I think we need to share it to show the stakes.
Yeah, this was a Marine Corps veteran. He came to them seeking help for combat trauma. But once he was in the program, once he actually felt safe, he admitted to engaging in preparatory behaviors.
That phrase from the reports gives me chills. Preparatory behaviors.
It should. It means he wasn't just thinking about suicide in the abstract. He was rehearsing. He was acquiring the memes. He was standing right on the precipice.
And because he was in a setting that wasn't a sterile, fluorescent-lit hospital, he opened up.
The sources say he credits the program with saving his life, intervening just in time. And this brings us to a really fascinating concept mentioned in the documents called tactical empathy.
I love that term. It sounds like something straight out of a field manual.
It's a brilliant rebranding of compassion, really. If you walk up to a tough, combat-hardened veteran and try to use soft, clinical language, they might just shut down. Tactical empathy is about creating a low-barrier entry point, meeting them on their turf.
The sources even mention using podcasts or break room settings to reach them.
Right. Instead of a clipboard and a white coat, maybe it's coffee in a break room with a peer who speaks the exact same language. It makes asking for help feel less like a weakness and more like a tactical decision to get back in the fight.
And the numbers suggest it's definitely working. As of the 2024 interim report, these grantees had made over 20,000 outreach contacts.
And 3,441 social service referrals. That is thousands of veterans who might have been part of that 60% blind spot who are now officially on the radar.
But, and since this is a deep dive, we have to look at the whole picture, it's not completely perfect. When you outsource government services to local nonprofits, things can get pretty messy.
They certainly can. And there was some biting testimony from a group called America's Warrior Partnership, or AWP, and we're just reporting their perspective here to understand the friction.
Yeah, they talked about the transactional trap,
Yeah.
which sounds like a serious flaw. What does that mean in practice?
So imagine you are one of these community organizations. You get the grant money. You are required to screen veterans for suicide risk. You ask the hard questions. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Do you have a plan?
Okay, standard procedure.
But let's say the veteran says yes. Now you have a crisis. But you are a small nonprofit. You aren't a hospital. You don't have an emergency room. You have to refer them to the VA.
And that's where the trap is.
AWP noted a case where a veteran was actively suicidal. The grantee did the screening. But there was no fast pass. There was no expedited special hotline for Fox participants. It felt like a transaction. They just had to give the veteran a referral number and hope for the best.
So they identified the fire, called the fire department, and got put on hold.
Essentially, AWP's critique was, quote, "There is no program, it is a transaction." They argued that it needs to be relational. If you don't have a back-end infrastructure to guarantee immediate help, a warm handoff where you literally ensure they are seen, the screening is just bureaucracy.
That is terrifying. You open up someone's trauma, you acknowledge they are in immediate danger, and then just pass them along.
It highlights the friction between the community side and the clinical side. We built the bridge to find them, but the off-ramp to the hospital is still under construction.
And this brings us to the legislative battles happening right now, because Congress is acutely aware of this gap. There's a bill called the No Wrong Door for Veterans Act, H.R. 1969.
Which proposes a very strict solution to this problem, a 72-hour deadline.
Meaning, if a Fox grantee refers a veteran, the VA must provide services within 3 days.
Correct.
Now, as a layperson, that sounds great. If I'm in crisis, 72 hours is already a really long time to wait. Why would anyone oppose that?
It's the classic tension between policy goals and operational reality. The VA is already struggling with massive staffing shortages. Critics argue that if you mandate a 72-hour window without adding thousands of new doctors, you're just creating a new bottleneck.
You're just shuffling the line around.
Right. You might bump a veteran who has been waiting 2 weeks for a routine PTSD checkup to make room for the new referral. Or, worse, the VA just physically can't meet the mandate, and the law becomes essentially meaningless.
It's easy to write a law that says help people fast.
Yeah.
It's really hard to build the infrastructure to actually do it consistently.
Exactly. But the fact that this bill exists shows that lawmakers are listening to the friction. They know the referral process is the weak link right now.
Speaking of lawmakers, let's talk about the future of this program. Because for a while, it looked like this was just a pilot program that was going to sunset.
Yeah.
But we are recording this deep dive in a timeline where it has survived.
Yes. As of February 2026, the program is very much alive. On November 12, 2025, the president signed an extension allowing operations to continue into fiscal year 2026.
So it bought some time.
It bought time. But the fight is now for long-term reauthorization. There are pushes to extend this all the way through fiscal year 2028 via bills like the No Wrong Door for Veterans Act and the Help PE for Heroes Act. And what I find fascinating is the political lineup here.
It's highly bipartisan, isn't it?
Deeply so. You have Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, leading the charge alongside Senator John Boozman, a Republican from Arkansas. In an era where politicians can barely agree on what day of the week it is, veteran suicide prevention completely cuts through the noise.
You also have big advocacy groups lobbying hard for it, calling a lifeline, the VFW, obviously, but also Blue Star Families.
Blue Star Families is a key player here because of who they represent. Remember, this grant supports families too. And that circles back to those environmental risks we talked about earlier.
How so?
Think about it. Who is the first person to notice that a veteran is isolating? Who notices that they're drinking more or maybe sleeping a lot less?
The spouse, the kids.
Exactly. The family is the very first line of defense. But often, the family has nowhere to turn until it escalates to a medical emergency. By funding organizations that support the family, the Fox grant is essentially arming the first responders who are actually inside the house.
And again, this goes back to geography, too. We mentioned mental health deserts earlier.
This is critical. The sources emphasize that the Fox grant specifically targets rural areas and tribal lands.
Right, because if you live in a rural part of, say, the Navajo Nation, the nearest VA hospital might be 4 hours away.
You are not going to drive 8 hours round trip for a 45-minute therapy session. It's just not happening. But if there is a tribal organization 10 minutes down the road that is funded by a Fox grant, suddenly help is accessible.
It decentralizes the care, it takes it out of the big marble buildings in the city and puts it right in the neighborhood.
Which, if you think about it, requires a massive amount of humility from the federal government.
That's a really interesting point. It really is.
It's an admission that we, the Department of Veterans Affairs, cannot do this alone. It's admitting that a local nonprofit or a tribal council might be vastly better at reaching that veteran than a massive federal agency is.
It's an admission that trust is local.
Precisely. Trust is local. A veteran might not trust the government, but they trust the guy who runs the local outdoor retreat.
And that brings it full circle to Parker Gordon Fox.
It really does. We started by talking about him as a sniper instructor, an elite warrior. But the more I read about him from the source material, the more I realize his legacy isn't really about his marksmanship.
It's about that generosity his family talked about.
His name is now permanently attached to a safety net that has caught thousands of veterans who otherwise would have just fallen through the cracks. Those 20,000 outreach contacts mentioned in the 2024 report. Those are 20,000 moments where someone reached out a hand because of a program named after him.
It's a profoundly powerful legacy. And looking at the big picture, the legislation, the no wrong door policy, the whole move upstream, what is the main synthesis for you?
I think the main takeaway is a fundamental challenge to how we define healthcare itself.
What?
The success of the SSG Fox program suggests that the cure for suicide isn't always medical. If we know that financial ruin is a major driver of suicide, then financial assistance literally is suicide prevention.
Right.
If legal trouble drives suicide, then a lawyer is a preventative treatment. If isolation kills, then a community group is the medicine.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It stops treating the symptom and starts treating the life.
And that leaves us with a provocative thought for everyone listening to mull over. If we accept that premise, that a job or a friend can be as effective as a prescription, why do we treat suicide prevention primarily as a medical issue? And how could we apply that no wrong door philosophy to the rest of our healthcare system, not just for veterans?
That is something to really think about. It challenges the whole idea that mental health is strictly about brain chemistry. It's about circumstance.
It certainly is.
Well, we are going to wrap our deep dive up there. This has been a heavy topic, but ultimately a hopeful one. The system is learning. It's messy. And as we discussed, there is friction, but it is moving upstream.
It definitely is.
To everyone listening, stay curious. And maybe, in the spirit of SSG Fox, check in on your own community connections. You never know who might need that upstream support. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.